Burton Cummings and the Guess Who, but we're not going to guess. We're not going to do much guessing right now as I bring in our next guest, Alan Horton, the play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves. There's no guessing here, Alan. Wolves need a victory, don't they?
They do. It's not technically a must-win, but it's a must-win. I mean, you can't go down 3-0. Nobody's ever come back from 3-0. Doesn't mean it won't happen someday, but you certainly don't like your chances going down 3-0 to the best team in the NBA. And that's, I think, Paul, that's something we've learned over these first two games is that OKC may have had some hiccups against Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets in the last round, but this is a team that has been dominant all season. It is historically dominant, and that's a big reason why they've been the better team over the first two games.
Now, there's a lot of ways to look at losses, Alan, as you're well aware, and you can analyze and microanalyze. Sometimes you look at it and go, the play of one team, in this case Oklahoma City, is so disruptive to the Timberwolves and what they're trying to do. It seems, here's my hypothesis, and this happens so much in sport, you get frustrated because you can't do what you normally have been able to do. And I think that's one of the masterful aspects of this Thunder team, isn't it? Is they're just so disruptive. I've used the comparison. They're like a I don't know what you call it, but a group of piranha that are always looking for opportunities to gnaw at you and to bother you, whether that's in a steal or a deflection or just taking away your driving lane. They're just so disruptive.
Yeah, I think of a pack of hyenas. I feel like hyenas work together as a group, like a five-man group to take down a much larger animal, like a lion or something or a wildebeest. But they just don't, so much of, guys at this level in the regular season, you kind of bring the ball up and you're in the monotony of 82 games and you don't like to see a lot of resistance. Maybe things will be a little bit physical inside in the paint at the rim, those type of things. But you're not expecting to see pressure on the perimeter. And when there is somebody who's out there hounding you time and time again, it does get to be a nuisance. It bothers you and it affects your play and it leads to turnovers. And not only is OKC putting that pressure on, but all five guys, and it doesn't even matter which five guys because they go five deep on their bench, and any of those guys that come in can assume one of the other roles that either Shea or Jalen or Chet or Isaiah Hartenstein can play. Alex Caruso and Kaysen Wallace, they have just interchangeable parts, and they're all moving together. And when you disrupt an offense, they can't do the things they're used to doing. They get frustrated. You try to do something to help your team, but it turns out you're trying to force something that's not there, and a turnover. And I'm not sure there have been many teams that have been better in turning turnovers into points. I mean, OKC got 31 in game one. They got 22 off of 14 turnovers. I mean, that's not a huge number. 14 is probably where the Wolves want to be against this defense. But, OKC turned them into 22 points. That's, on average in these first two games, every turnover is being turned into 1.6 points. That's a really high number. OKC is really good. It's just not forcing turnovers, but then turning them into points. That's the next step of the equation, which they've become really good at.
So, Alan, if you're in Coach Finch's inner sanctum, thinking about what you need to do to offset this swarming, effective defense. And by the way, Alan, I think they're the most, they being the Thunder, are the most impressive help side defensive team that I can remember in the NBA, in terms of, like you said, the pack of hyenas metaphor, I think is perfect, how they move as one. But they're as good or better than anybody I've ever seen, especially when you've got the defensive 3-second limitation. But the way they're able to help each other out and close penetration lanes out it's just so impressive. So now, Coach Finch, what would you do? What would you suggest that the Wolves need to do to counter this effective defensive execution that the Oklahoma City Thunder throw at you every game?
Yeah, it's a great point, Paul, because a lot of teams could put some pressure on and overload on certain players. But players in this league are good enough, fast enough, strong enough to eventually get used to that and find the open man. And when you find the open man against the Thunder on the weak side, their closeout rate is incredible. It's just, they're anticipating that. They're just they're on top of every move you make. And most teams, like I said, will press you like that. They'll get burned by giving up wide open shots. And the Wolves did get some wide open shots in game one. They got 30 of them, and they can only hit 8. And part of that is just, part of the reason you miss wide open threes, it should be just a standard, right? Like every wide open three is created equal. But what you do is against OKC, you're constantly, they're in your head. And so even though you have a wide open three, someone's closing hard. I better make this. There's just more pressure on those shots when it's coming against Oklahoma City. As for adjustments for the Timberwolves, they didn't play well offensively in game one, so the bar was set pretty low. They were better in game two, and I think when you go deeper in the series, you get naturally a little more comfortable with what you're seeing. We saw the turnovers cut down. We saw the offensive efficiency go up a little bit, not quite enough. But I think they've got to find ways. The Thunder are so good defensively that they can not only focus on shutting down Anthony Edwards, but they really have shut off the water for Julius Randle. And that's kind of the hidden key, I think, to the Timberwolves offense, is that Julius Randle has just been exceptional this postseason. And as he's gone, so have the Wolves. And they've done a really good job of fronting him, preventing a lot of the easy looks, the space he likes to operate in. There hasn't been a lot of that for Julius Randle. And he had a big first half in game one. He's been really quiet the last 3 halves. I think they've got to find a way to get Julius Randle going. We saw Ant, have a better game two than he had game one, but still it's a struggle every single time down the floor. I think he maybe got one wide open shot in game two, and it stands out because it's so rare. He was open in the corner and knocked down a 3 opposite the Thunder bench, and that was the only time that he really got a clean open look with nobody around him. That's how good OKC has been defensively.
Well, I think too, Alan, that your point is so well taken, and going back to your description of the Wolves missing wide open threes in game one, when you're playing against a team that is that good, it's always on your mind. You're always a little tense. You're never just relaxing and stepping into your shot, because you have to adapt to their pace and the frenetic pace that they pressure you into playing at, and you're always feeling, I got to hit that. I'm open. And you could just see that in the Wolves in game one. Now in game two, like you said, better production from the bench. Naz Reid was better, still not very good. Non-existent in game one. Now, but here's a mystery question for me. You had mentioned about as Julius Randle has gone, and he has been fantastic up to this point. Now, to me, though, with Randle in particular, but even with Gobert a bit, is I don't quite understand why the emphasis for Randle to create his shot opportunities is done in space so much, as opposed to getting him in closer to the basket and shortening the amount of time he has to work with the ball, because the Thunder are so good not just at helping but at pulling the chair out when he's trying to back his guy in, that he's always off balance and uncomfortable. It would seem to me that cutting down the number of dribbles and the amount of time that he has to attack their defense, I think that would be in my opinion, it certainly couldn't be worse than it is right now.
Yeah, you got to play quick, because if you take too long and hold the ball, that just gives them the green light to, like you said, pull the chair out as a defender. Or there was a play in game one where Julius was posting up, and it was Naz, I think, at the time. He was, and Jalen Williams was on him, and Jalen was reaching around, trying to poke the ball free. He couldn't get there, but he kept going to one side, almost daring Naz to spin the other way. Naz eventually did, and what does he run into? He runs into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's right there to rip the ball away from him. That's the type of defense that OKC is playing. I think the Wolves would love to get him more post-up opportunities, but they're fronting him on some of those entry passes. And so then you saw a couple of times Julius kind of move out to the high post, lob it in there, but then that went awry too, because another help defender is coming over.
That's true.
And as soon as Julius makes that catch, then he's getting it ripped away again. So it's paramount to play quickly. You've got to keep the ball moving. You've got to find a little confidence, a little rhythm. Boy, it would help if the Wolves could knock down some threes. Since game one against the Lakers, first game of the postseason, they hit 21 of 42. They've now played, 12 games. 5-5-2, so they played 11 games since, and they're shooting 32%. They just have not been able to knock down threes since game one, and in this series, they're shooting 29% in the 2 games. They just have not been able to knock down threes. Now, the other thing they could do is flip it to the other end of the floor. They've got to find a way to slow down the Thunder. I mean, they're getting some points they're winning the transition battle. They're winning the paint battle. They're winning the turnover battle, so they're getting a lot of open floor or secondary break opportunities, and that's where guys like Shea and Jalen Williams, who's been fantastic, that's where those guys really thrive. The Wolves. But you look at the final box scores, and OKC has shot 50% in both games. The Wolves have a really good defense. They should not be allowing 50% shooting, even though a lot of that is coming, in transition and easier opportunities. The Wolves have to find a way to defend better, and I think they're going to put some more pressure on. You got to make OKC as uncomfortable as they make you. I think you have to sort of match that. And I think you'll see that dialed up. They want to continue to be physical with Shea. We'll see what kind of a whistle he gets on the road in this crowd. But part of the battle in game one was that Shea got going in the second half because so many guys were in foul difficulty. And when you're in foul difficulty, there's that mindset of, well, I want to do all the things coach is telling me to do, but I also can't commit a fifth foul because now I'm one step away from being fouled out. And Jaden fouled out eventually. But I think they've got to throw more guys at him and continue to be physical. And, if he does go to the free throw line, he goes to the free throw line. If guys foul out, they foul out. You can't have that, sort of a hesitation or that mindset of, well, I don't want to get my fourth in the third quarter or my sixth in the, midway through the fourth. That's out the window now. You have to go full bore because Shea's too good. You have to keep constant pressure on him and hope you get a little bit of a better whistle on the home floor.
I'm talking with Alan Horton, the play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves here on the Basketball Show on Sports 1440. Now, Alan, here's a mystery to me. Why pick up? This is my being an old guy and an old guy coach. Why do you pick up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the MVP in the league, 60 feet from the basket, and then get blown by? This is what I don't understand. Like, to me, the Wolves have to match, like you were just pointing out. They have to match the kind of not just energy, but defensive execution and rotations as best they can to what the Thunder are doing. But the Thunder aren't beating Minnesota 45 feet from the basket. They're beating them 30 feet and in with their defensive rotation. So I see it as such a disadvantage, not just in expending energy and maybe picking up 1 or 2 cheap fouls away from the basket with no chance of scoring, but I think McDaniel's length is such an asset. But he gets bumped off, again, 15 or 20 feet above the free throw line, and then all of a sudden you have Randall or Conley, somebody else guarding Shai who's at a real disadvantage because one-on-one at times when it's just straight up, McDaniels can bother Shai more than most defensive players. So, but that's an epidemic in the NBA, the pressuring so far from the basket and getting blown by. Am I seeing things? I see what you're saying, and it is annoying when someone does pick up and then he races right to the rim and nobody else helps out. I mean, that's where you have to have 5 guys playing together because, okay, if we know that Jaden's going to put some pressure on him, but and it almost means you can't get blown by in that situation either. You've got to you're trying to slow him up, you're trying to make him work, you're trying to make him expend energy, which I think pays off in fourth quarters. This is a 48-minute game, and it's amazing when you make guys work for those first 3 quarters. It does take a toll in the fourth quarter. Great point.
So it's about wearing them down, grinding them down. You just don't want to run up from 75 feet and have him blow by you. And if you are going to put even more pressure on, there's different levels of pressure too. Some token pressure, maybe some medium pressure, and then a high pressure, I would say. And if you are going to go high pressure route, then you've got to have the other 4 guys ready to immediately step up and help you, step in front of Shai, and then rotate accordingly if you're going to do that. You can't just have one guy decide to go do it, and then it breaks down the entire defense because Shai's extremely dangerous. But you also have to try something. I mean, you're down 0-2, and Shai's had 5 straight 30-point games. He's been unstoppable. The final 3 games against Denver, first 2 games against Minnesota. You've got to try to change things up. I think the Wolves will maybe try to switch things up a little quicker. Maybe they start, instead of trying to stay with your man, maybe it's a switch scenario where they just kind of switch every position, and then you're helping off whoever might be isolated against Shea. But that's a dangerous game because they'll hunt the mismatch that they want. And so that's the game within the game. It's a fascinating chess match, and when you've got a piece like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, you can see how tough it is to slow it down.
Absolutely, and I think when you're pointing that out, that's really the key. You're seeing a generational player, and one of the fascinating aspects of it, and it was great to see Anthony Edwards the other night go to more of hunting his shot, not just getting to the rim, not just settling for the three. 12 for 26 is a decent night. And I mean, I say that, he had 32 points. That's a really good night against a very good defensive team. The one thing I'd love your perspective on, does Anthony take too long to decide whether he's going to attack and handle the ball for too long out front against an Oklahoma City defense that the longer they set, the more daunting they become?
Yeah, the more you hold the ball, the more they get set, and it's just, even if you've moved it a couple of times already, if one guy holds it, it allows the defense to reset, and then that negates everything you've already done in that possession. Yes, when you face a really good defense, you've got to play quicker, and that was something Chris Finch stressed before Game 2, and I think that's why you saw Ant have a little more success in Game 2, and he got those 32 points without the benefit or he hit 1 3. He was 1 of 9 from distance. But, to OKC's credit, again, not a lot of straight-line drives for Ant. How many times did you see him get in the paint, but he had to weave his way there, a meandering type of path.
That's right.
Where he's bouncing off a few bodies, he's Euro-stepping, he's switching hands. That's not easy to do on a consistent basis, but that's what OKC forces you into. But I think Ant's going to have a little better game tonight. I think the Wolves' offense is going to have a little better game tonight. I think maybe the whistle probably against Shea hopefully evens out a little bit. I don't think that's been as big a factor as maybe the national talking point has been. He is annoying to play. There's no doubt about it. He's one of the handful of guys that seems to get a very friendly whistle. Like, he's really good at drawing fouls. There's no doubt about that. But it's the 3 or 4 other whistles that he draws in a game where he happens to be already going down to the floor, or he flails his head back, or in Game 1 when he got tripped up and there was no trip and he went down and the official still blew a whistle. That's what drives you absolutely irate. And it backs up the argument that he gets a whistle. Well, why are you blowing a whistle if there's absolutely no contact and he fell down? Why are you so quick to reward him with free throws? And the Wolves had to burn a challenge just to get that call overturned. That's what's frustrating. It's not him. He deserves to get to the free throw line at the rate he does, probably 8 or 9 times. But it's the 3 or 4 times a game where he draws whistles that he is hunting for the foul, and in sort of non-basketball ways. It's almost sometimes like, Paul, he's already walking downstairs, like he's crouching down as if he's already taken contact. There's plenty of examples of him out there, even yelling before even contact is even happening. He's really adept at it. I don't know why the officials are so quick to give him the benefit of the doubt, because it does feel like he gets a better whistle than most guys in the league. Again, there are a handful of guys that get that kind of treatment, and it's a little curious to me. I don't understand quite why they're so quickly eager to blow the whistle. Jalen Brunson, we're seeing another guy in the Eastern Conference Finals who draws a very heavy whistle as well. I don't sometimes he embellishes contact a little bit, but it's something that the league really has to look into, is a lot of these non-basketball plays and guys selling contact that is maybe marginal at best.
I call it the James Harden derangement syndrome, because I think Harden was, to me, the most annoying of all of what you're describing. Because
he put the wheels in motion, didn't he?
He really did. He clearly defined that flailing, locking arms sort of thing. A lot of times, the thing I find interesting about Gilgeous-Alexander is, I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, but I thought his acceptance speech was so humble and gracious. And of course, when you're accepting MVP, it's easy to be humble and gracious, just like it is in victory. But I think that's one of the I think it's one of the unique qualities that he has possessed. And I think it's one of the reasons he gets as many whistles as he does, from my perspective, Alan, because he's very good at selling the foul or the perceived foul, but he doesn't whine at the refs like a Luka Doncic does, or like a lot of players do. And I really think that gets in the opponent's head, and I think it really has gotten into the Timberwolves' head about worrying about that.
I would say that he has complained an awful lot when he does get a foul called against him at the other end of the floor. There was,
does he? Okay.
Point, there was a play in game 2, I think, maybe both games, where he was beside himself that they called a foul on him, and my analyst Jim Peterson was like, that's his first foul. I think he can live with it, and with what he gets at the other end, it's ironic that he's so complaining about this call. But he's a really humble guy, and I don't know him at all, but I know his cousin Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and just hearing Nickeil speak and being around him for the last 2+ years. And these guys are really close. I think there's a lot of similarities between the two. Shea doesn't go to Miami in the offseason. He doesn't go to L.A. and spend time there. I mean, he may go occasionally, but he basically goes back to his home in Toronto. He works out with the same guys he's been working out with since his high school days. They go to a quiet little gym somewhere outside of Toronto, and they wake up at 5 a.m. and they go through all these workouts. It's not a big shiny production. There's no social media people there. He's really low key, all about winning, all about getting better, and he's kept the same core group of guys around him, and it's really paid off. He's an incredible talent. There's no doubt about it.
Well, and what I love, to that point, just to build on that, he is an incredible talent, but it's that extra discipline that you just described. It's improving while people aren't looking. And my co-host Ryan and I were talking in our first segment about, I think it's really good for the game of basketball to have some of these newer players that are less flamboyant, less about the hype, and more about the substance, having the mid-range game come back into vogue. Like I was jokingly saying, I hope there's a bunch of analysts who are sitting in basements with their pocket pens and computer screens that are being told to fill their boxes up and go home because the mid-range game is back. But I think Gilgeous-Alexander is good for the game, and I think it's good for I think it's actually good for Anthony Edwards too, because the more Anthony develops his mid-range game, the better he's going to become. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, at one point, I think he did hit a mid-range shot in Game 2, but he had been 2 for 18 on his mid-range shots in the postseason, which kind of it just sort of amplifies what, his focus in the offseason was working on his three-point shot, and boy, did he get there. I mean, 10 attempts per game, top 5 in attempts, and top 5 in he was almost a 40% three-point shooter.
Absolutely.
So that's heavy volume, that's heavy efficiency. I mean, that's elite stuff. But in the postseason, those shots have become more difficult. 1 for 9 the other night, although he had been shooting 14 to 28 in his prior 3 postseason games, so he had gotten his 3-ball going a little bit until Game 2. But I think what this postseason has shown is, especially against good defenses, you've got to take the shots. You've got to find the open shots, and if the open shots are in the mid-range, you've got to be able to knock those down. And Thunder do that. Jalen Williams is good at it, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is really good at it. And it's the other point to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that's great for the league is that he's a perfect fit for Oklahoma City too. It's a small market, maybe the smallest of markets in the NBA. And he doesn't seem to be one of these guys that needs the bright lights. That's what makes this league great, is that, yes, there are some guys that want to leave for bigger markets, but I think they're becoming few and far between. Guys like Anthony Edwards love being in Minnesota. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander loves being in Oklahoma City. Giannis, for at least up until this point, has loved being in Milwaukee. Who knows if that continues? But that's really good for the league when you've got some stability with star players. Being in small markets. John Morant, good example in Memphis. It's and there's so many good players across the league. It's really, I was talking to one front office guy in this postseason, and it's just like this league is so deep, and expansion is probably on the horizon. But right now, it's tougher to make rosters. It's tougher to get playing time. I mean, the Wolves have guys on the bench that I can't wait to see the next year. And I'm not putting the cart ahead of the horse. But T.J. Shannon and Rob Dillingham and Jalen Clark and Josh Minot, the Wolves have a whole number of the 5-man unit that they could throw out there that we just haven't seen because there's so many top-tier guys ahead of them.
So true. The depth of good players in the league, like when people compare eras, and you look back even in the 90s, at the 90s Chicago Bulls, and look at Bulls and their great teams, their rosters, numbers 7 through 12, pale in comparison to 7 through 12 in the modern era today. I totally agree with that. And to your point about small and mid-market teams, it doesn't matter in the same way it mattered before, because with media accessibility, with all of the options that are available right now, whether you play in Indianapolis or you play in Oklahoma City or you play in LA or New York, there's some differences, but you have the opportunity to make as much money and to get as much attention, because the way you're marketed now and the options that you have are just so different.
Yep, no doubt about it. I mean, a max deal is a max deal, and there are some ancillary benefits that come with that, but guys can more than make up for that in off season if they want to spend time in the Miami, New York, LA trifecta area or overseas or wherever. They can accomplish both those things. And I think for the key guys, I think deep down they like the idea of playing for one team for their entire career. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, and it's happening less and less in this league, but I think they like the idea of it.
Well, and I think, too, that LeBron's journey, for instance, long and historic as it has been, has also received an awful lot of criticism, I think, because of some of the decisions that were made and the way they were made. And I think it's taken some of the luster out of the glory of switching franchises in pursuit of a championship. And you even mentioned Giannis. I think Giannis would be happy to stay in Milwaukee if it just didn't feel like Milwaukee was painted into a corner and they really don't have the options to build a team around him that could compete for a championship. It's almost like it's run its course, not because of disloyalty, but just because of reality.
I think that's one reason why I brought this up on the broadcast the other night when things got a 20-point lead for the Thunder. OKC is uniquely suited to kind of handle what happens when you get to the superstar level and you go to the NBA Finals and you win titles like Giannis did, like Phoenix was trying to do. But they now have no more. They've exhausted all their options, like you said. They have no more first-round picks. They've traded them all. They've got older players. They've got expensive rosters. You're looking at not just being in the tax, but having an extra tax because you've been in there multiple times, the repeater tax. And so a lot of franchises are dealing with that. Denver was dealing with that. Phoenix was dealing with that. Milwaukee, there are other examples. But the Thunder have a treasure trove of first-round picks coming up. They've got a lot of young players. And even though this team is really good and might win an NBA title, it's probably not going to look the same in a couple of years. A couple of those guys will move on as guys get, Shea's going to have a max, Chet's going to have a max, and Jalen Williams is going to have a max. That doesn't leave you a whole lot of room behind it. But that's where smartly drafting and having all those picks that they've got coming, that's where you replenish the system and fill out the rest of your roster. They'll be able to do that, whereas Milwaukee and Phoenix, teams like that, they can't do it. Even Los Angeles, the Lakers, they're going to have that high-end talent, but how do you fill out the rest of your roster? The OKC is uniquely qualified to handle that, and don't think Sam Presti hasn't thought about that. This guy's a mastermind, in terms of how he builds a roster and thinks about the future. It's scary to think of how good they're going to be, I think, for a considerable period of time.
So true. Alan, you've been so generous with your time today. Thank you. And by the way, one thought I had the other night, and I was actually talking to my brothers who are both live in the Twin Cities and are big Wolves fan, and we're always texting during the games. And I said, isn't this great? 2 years in a row, the Minnesota Timberwolves are in the conference finals, regardless of the outcome. Of course, we want them to get to the NBA finals. But, man, and you know this as well or better than anybody, Alan, you talk about if you had a picture of a logo in the dictionary for long-suffering fans, it would be the Timberwolves logo. The decades of just the ups and downs of this franchise, and to be there and to make the bold moves they have. So excited for the deserving fans in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, it's something that shouldn't be overlooked, and we try to make sure on the broadcast to before every series to kind of appreciate where you are and where this team has gotten, because it's not too long ago that Wolves fans remember, the biggest day was draft lottery day, and then the NBA draft, and it's so nice not to be involved with that. But to make the conference finals 2 years in a row, the last team to do that was Golden State and their run in 2019 that ended. So that's saying something, Paul, because that's been 5 or 6 years. And we know how tough the West is, and to be amongst the final two in your conference, is something that's not easy to do. If it ends in disappointment like it did last year, obviously that's not a great taste left in your mouth. But keep in mind, in perspective, you finished second out of the West in amongst the 13 other teams. You were second best, and that is something. And you put yourself in a position to possibly have things go your way. And Chris Finch and Tim Connelly have talked about this. You want as many bites of the apple as you can get. There's the rare team. Phoenix got one bite at the apple. They got all the way to the NBA Finals. They couldn't win it. They were up 2-0. They lost to Giannis in Milwaukee. And it's gone downhill ever since, and that team was completely dismantled, and it looks very different than when it did. You got one shot at that thing. Milwaukee basically got one shot of it, and they were able to capture it. Denver got one shot at it. I mean, they've had some exciting playoff series since, but they can't get back to the Western Conference Finals even, much less the NBA Finals. So to get there twice is unique. It is special, and it's a sign that that this front office and coaching staff have. And the talented players. There's no doubt about it. It's nice to have a guy like Anthony Edwards. It doesn't guarantee you're going to win finals every year, but, boy, you got to get there to give yourself a shot, and at least the Wolves have accomplished that.
Absolutely, and I'll throw Toronto into that mix as well. They had their shot, they won it, and they did, didn't they, with Kawhi? That was an incredible job by Masai Ujiri to take advantage of that. You knew that was only one shot. That was your one shot.
You could say Phoenix and Milwaukee had extra shots in years, but that you knew there was only one shot at, and they pulled it off in a big way. That's
so true. Alan Horton, play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Thanks so much for your generosity of your time today. Enjoy the game tonight, and let's pull for a Timberwolves W.
That sounds good, Paul. Always enjoy the conversation. Thanks.
Likewise. Take care. Alan Horton, play-by-play voice, Minnesota Timberwolves, setting up the game tonight. It's going to be so exciting to see if the Wolves have a gasp, if they can figure out a way. And everybody's betting against them, which is why I think that makes this so compelling. This is a talented team, and there's some guys on there that are really hungry, so I think we can all be excited about that. So we're going to take a break right now, and then it's going to be closing time here on the Basketball Show. Ryan and I have a bunch of stuff to talk about with you today. Thanks for spending your time with us. We'll be right back here on your sports leader, Sports 1440.